Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. And if you are just tuning in with me for the very first time, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm really glad you're here with me today. I am your host, Heather Carey, nutritionist, chef, mom, and a woman who has been around the block with food. I want to open up about real food in relation to health, weight, and our bodies so you can make peace with what you eat. Hello, everybody, and happy spring. I have been giving so much thought and attention to the topic of perimenopause and menopause because I think that it is that important that women get well educated on this extremely important time of our lives. Menopause and perimenopause happens to every woman. You do not get a hall pass. So I want to give you as much information as I possibly can from a nutrition standpoint and just from an education standpoint. So today I had the privilege of speaking to Kristin Mallon and Michele Wispelwey, founders of FemGevity, which is a telemedicine company focused on menopause and feminine longevity. They provide concierge care for women seeking personalized health care. You call them, they take care of you and all of the things that have to do with your hormones and menopause. It is a fantastic service in this day and age of doctors really not being specialized in menopause and hormones. I would highly recommend, if you are curious about hormone replacement therapy, what it is, what it can do for you, and all the other hormones that go into it, give this one a listen. It's a really important talk that I had with them, and I think that you are going to love it. Today, I have Michele Wispelwey and Kristin Mallon with me. Michele and Kristin co-founded FemGevity, a telemedicine company focused on menopause and feminine longevity, providing concierge care for women seeking personalized health care. Michele is a visionary leader in the femtech and digital healthcare industry, leveraging her passion for travel and art to create innovative solutions that increase access and reduce long-term health risks for women of all backgrounds and ages. With her sharp ability to identify gaps in patient care, Michele has successfully coached top-ranked healthcare experts to drive organizations towards clear and efficient pathways, and her telehealth platform, designed to provide integrated services for women, is a testament to her ingenuity. And Kristin is a board-certified nurse midwife, menopause and feminine longevity expert, breast health expert, published author, and mother of four. She graduated from the University of California, Berkeley with a degree in psychology and completed her bachelor's degree in nursing at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. So welcome, Michele and Kristin. I'm so happy to have both of you on the podcast today. So the business of menopause, it is booming right now, as far as I see it. And I am all for it because every single woman on this planet will go through menopause, and it can affect women for decades. The downside, and in my experience, is that many doctors, including gynecologists, are, I think, totally in the dark about how to really help women. And I'm going to guess that both of you saw this as an opportunity to start your business. So tell me about FemGevity, how it got started, and how it helps to fill in the gaps in healthcare for women.
So FemGevity is a digital telehealth company, as you said, and thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. So this is an honor on our part. And, we fill in the gaps on this one size doesn't fit all for women to ensure that anytime throughout this menopause journey, they have someone to turn to with questions, someone to guide them through their unique and evolving experiences, to alleviate confusion and fears. And we just treat each woman as a unique individual to make sure they're seen and heard And there's some vital stepping stones that we help them through to really empower them to redefine their relationship with aging. And, this level of sustained and individualized care that we give for concierge care is really groundbreaking, and you don't see it anywhere else. And we offer cutting edge precision medicine services with it at an attainable price. And menopause comes with 100 plus symptoms. So women have debilitating joint pain. They have heart palpitations that could lead them to fear of heart disease. They have anxiety and depression, and they're overprescribed these medications when really it's a depletion of their estrogen levels or progesterone, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's really where we kind of came to grips with creating FemGevity and coming together for it.
Yeah, I think that the one size does not fit all model is good because, and just at least in my experience, and I know the experience with just other women I have spoken to, is that you go into your gynecologist's office and either they have some education around menopause or they don't. And they just give you the one size fits all hormone replacement, or they even talk you out of it, which I think is sometimes a little unethical. Or I've had doctors who are just so uneducated and have said, I'd rather go to jail than have to take hormones. And how could you be taking hormones? And so I think getting tested and really looking at each woman as an individual is so important. And you're right, there are dozens of different symptoms, right? So tell me how it works when a woman reaches out to you, and what is the advantage of something like a concierge service versus just finding a gynecologist?
Yeah. So when a woman is looking to kind of get help with any perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms, and I always kind of encourage women that if you're experiencing something even as early as your late 30s, 38, 39, into your 40s and 50s, you should, even if it's something that you wouldn't necessarily equate with a hormonal change, like it doesn't relate to your period, maybe it relates to sleep or it relates to mood changes, it's good to stop and think, could it be hormonal related or could it be perimenopausal related? Because so many things like joint pain or things like bloating and gas pain and abdominal change or gastrointestinal changes are associated with perimenopause, and they're kind of brushed off as something else. So I always really encourage any woman, really 38 plus, to kind of consider, is this a perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal concern? And so they can come to our website, which is femgevityhealth.com, and schedule an initial consultation. We usually go through about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour is how long it kind of takes to kind of go through and really understand everything that's going on with a woman, where she's at, what her family history is, how different people in her family have kind of experienced menopause, so that we can get a really good picture of where she's coming from, where she's potentially going, what questions, what concerns she has. Then we usually come up with a comprehensive laboratory analysis recommendation. So sometimes it's just regular general hormone balancing, hormone testing. Sometimes it's what you would get at a regular annual exam, like your hemoglobin A1C and your CBC, which is a complete blood count, and your chemistry levels and cholesterol levels. And sometimes it's more involved precision medicine testing, which includes gut microbiome testing or micronutrient testing or genetics or genomic testing or epigenetic testing. So we kind of really meet the woman where she's at in terms of like how far down the rabbit hole of her own health does she want to go. And then we kind of start peeling back the layers to having her feel optimal. And it doesn't usually happen all in one visit. Rome was not really built in a day. And a lot of times women wait really long. They wait until they're feeling pretty bad. They're pretty far into the symptoms. On a scale of 1 to 10, they're rating their symptoms as a 10 or 9. And so it takes a while for us to kind of peel back what's happening, solve one thing at a time. We solve the 10s and the 8s and the 9s, and then something else will come up. And then she'll be like, it's like the gateway theory, like something was bothering her, like insomnia or hot flashes on a 10, then we solve those. And she's like, oh, actually, now I'm feeling constipated and bloated and I have abdominal weight gain. So then we solve that. So we usually work with women on a month-to-month basis. So we're checking in with them every month and adjusting with them as the months go on, because when you're going through perimenopause and menopause, a lot is changing month to month still. And you're not kind of in that consistent cycle that you're experiencing in your 20s and 30s. You're in a much more evolving cycle now in your 40s and 50s. Even when you stop menstruating, you're still sometimes having a cycle.
Yeah, you're sometimes like I liken it sometimes to like you're in a hurricane. I mean, you're so, I mean, at least that's been my experience. I mean, so I know some women just float through menopause. I mean, they're like barely even notice. And that has not been my experience. And I definitely started having menopausal symptoms and perimenopausal symptoms. I mean, when I was probably in my early 40s, but I had no idea. I mean, and that's a question, because you said, women should start to come to see you in their late 30s. I had no idea. I knew that there was menopause, but this whole concept of perimenopause, no one really told me about that. I mean, no one really educated me, and no one was talking about it, including my gynecologist. So how would women know to come to see you in their 30s? I mean, is there a movement to start really educating women more? Because we don't learn about this in health class. I mean, even we learn about our periods, in like health class at school, but learning about perimenopause and menopause is, I don't know. I mean, I remember asking my mom, like when she went into menopause, and she barely remembers. She doesn't really, So what do you think is the future for just educating women? And I agree with you. I think knowing that like in your 30s, you should start thinking about this and getting yourself set up is a great idea and a great plan.
So one of the things that, we are going to be doing at FemGevity, and you see a lot of other, menopause companies doing, is creating these communities, and for where women could speak freely, privately about it and educate each other on what's going on. And I think there's a lot to be said about a lot of, social media that talks about their experiences and what they're going through it. Even as influencers, right? When they're talking openly about how they're going through it, what they're doing, what they're feeling, how their partner feels about them going through it. And it's not just about education and community for the women, but it's also education and community for the men. And the more we start doing this, we're ingraining it in our daughters and younger generations to be more open about speaking about it. And this also goes into play in the workforce too, right? The more the workforce ingrains and companies ingrain in this community to have education and time, paid leave and time off towards menopause, because it could be anywhere from like 7 to 10 plus years of your life, depending when you start going through perimenopause symptoms. That is also going to trickle down into younger generations to be more open about it. And it just, and I think it's just, I speak to my young daughter about it and changes, and it's just it's going to take time. This femtech world was coined in 2016, and I think we've made amazing strides since then. Even if you look in the past year of just how much menopause has been spoken about things that get spoken about in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and Kristin and I being here today speaking to you about it, just shows that there's a lot of longevity that we're going to get out of it. And it hasn't been spoken about because it's not been seen as this sexy phase in life, but we're changing that.
Yeah, well, I think it hasn't been spoken about in like my mother's generation, because it's just like something you have to go through, right? It's something you have to just kind of go through and get out onto the other side.
Or I don't know, honestly, my mother is like, I don't even remember going through menopause. Like, you had to have remembered something, but it's, she blanked it out. But I agree with you that that is probably the benefit of social media. One of the benefits is that I think the conversation is happening and starting to happen, and that it can reverberate through social media. Now, I mean, there's a lot of
that's very controversial conversation to get into.
There can be a lot of like quackiness on social media too,
exactly,
which drives me crazy. But I think just continuing to have the conversations, and like you said, you talked to your daughter about it. I have a daughter who's in her 20s, and I certainly am very open about it because I want her to know what she's going to be up against, in a number of years. So I think that's, and the communities too. So it sounds like you are starting. Is that something that you do now?
We are. And we're actually even actively building out our website for a section for men, because we have partners and spouses that reach out to us on a daily basis, of the woman in their life going through these situations, and they don't know. And it's a real, our marketing company actually found that 50% of the Google searches are men too, but they don't speak about it. So
interesting. That's very interesting.
Very.
So I wanted to just now circle back about, what you do at FemGevity. You mentioned that you do testing, and tell me a little bit more about that, because that sounds very individualized. When I went to see my gynecologist, who I had to go through a number of gynecologists, and now I have one that I like, but they were just like, oh, you're having a hot flash? Okay, here, take this, So there was no testing. I mean, and so tell me about the benefits of getting tested, what you do, and how that then individualizes your treatment plan.
Yeah, I think that, what you're talking about kind of with your experience about going to a lot of different doctors is really one of the fundamental reasons why we started FemGevity. And it's, not that I'm looking to get my OBGYN physicians off the hook, my, colleagues off the hook, but to their kind of defense, I think it's not really fair that the medical institution has forced on them to be experts in so much when it comes to women's health care. And we haven't, and we are starting to now take women's health care much more seriously. To think that someone has to be an expert in pregnancy, obstetrics, delivery, the complications and the surgeries that are required for that specialty. Then they also need to be an expert in gynecology, gynecological surgeries, and the complications that go along with each of those. And then they also need to understand endocrine and the hormonal changes that are happening with a woman. It's a lot to put on one physician. And most physicians get their education about menopause from drug reps that come in to see them and try to sell them on a patch. And so it makes sense why women are lost. And that's why we really feel very emboldened and empowered to kind of bring this message that women should seek menopausal specialists, or someone who, like myself, I call myself a menopause expert who has the confidence and the know-how to use multiple different modalities and multiple different treatment options and multiple different testing options, like you mentioned. So the different types of testings are kind of as wide as how a woman kind of sees her own health. So we do standard testing. So the kind of what's generally covered by your health insurance, which includes, basic hormone testing, basic annual blood work testing. But we also offer much more extensive testing. And this is for a woman who's kind of looking for a functional medicine approach, or an integrative medicine approach, or a precision medicine approach, which really encompasses micronutrient testing, which is really more the nutrients on the cellular level, the plasma level, rather than just the blood level. You can test vitamin B and zinc and magnesium on a serum level, on a blood level, and your body's going to do a really good job of trying to keep that perfectly balanced and pulling vitamins from other places. But when you get to a micronutrient level, or a cellular level, or metabolite level, you're able to see where true deficiencies lie. And so this testing, usually runs about several $100s a test, but gives you a much more comprehensive view of all types of amino acids you could be deficient in, what type of organic acids, omegas, what types of heavy metals might you have toxicity in, every single vitamin that you could possibly imagine under the sun, the fat soluble vitamins, the water soluble vitamins, all the B vitamins, things like glutathione and other antioxidants. So it's a very comprehensive bird's eye view of what's going on. We also have, the gut microbiome is very important, and how you absorb things through your gut will also affect how you metabolize a lot of your hormones. And so that's a much more comprehensive and usually a little bit of a longer approach to hormone balancing, but some women do pick the gut microbiome balancing way to balance their hormones. So that's usually a stool sample that's sent out for analysis. And, you can find everything under the sun, from pathogens to yeast to SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You can find out if you have how much good bacteria, how much bad bacteria, what type of digestive enzymes are being used, how the bile is excreted, if there's blood in the stool, what type of blood, what type of immunoglobulins are present, if there's any inflammation, what type of inflammation, what types of sensitivities are found in the gut. So there's a lot of information we can get from the gut itself. There's also genetic testing. So there's a lot of different types of genetic tests that can be run in terms of nutrigenomic testing. And this is fascinating to me. So, it's a big popular test is the MTHFR test. That's a test that a lot of people know in women's health because it affects pregnancy. It affects how we metabolize folic acid, and folate versus folic acid. And that, a woman who has an MTHFR mutation, homozygous for certain types of MTHFR mutation too, need specific types of methylated folate. So, that might be getting like a little too nerdy and sciencey. But right. So there's that example, and then times about 3,000. So we have about 3,000 different known genetic SNPs that really play a role into how we metabolize. So just yesterday, I was in a consultation with someone, and it was really cool because she had done a lot of testing. And so she had done a micronutrient test, and then the genetic test takes much longer to get back. And then when her genetic test came back, we were able to see why she had all these nutrient deficiencies, and then what we needed to do to correct them. So that was really, it's really kind of satisfying to see all of it come full circle in ways like that. And then we also offer epigenetic testing, which is another kind of much more experimental type of testing where you can, this is where you have different companies that are looking at biological age, and they're looking at like the epigenome is the layer above the genetic code that turns genes on and off. So you might have a gene for lupus, let's say, but if that gene never gets turned on, then it's not something that you would ever even know of or experience in your lifetime. So that there's a lot of different ways that, mainly through methylation and oxidation, that epigenetic tests are kind of being run nowadays. And I think that that's one of the biggest ways that we're going to kind of see technology come into play, is with the genetics, nutrigenomics, and epigenetic tests that kind of come about in the next months, years, 5 years. I think that there's going to be major strides made in that department. So I think that's really exciting. And that's kind of a lot of the fun things that we do. We also do, we also offer a genetic cancer screen as well. And so that's because we do a lot of longevity in addition to menopause management. We also do look at cancer genetics as well. So that's kind of like the whole picture of the different types of precision medicine testing we offer. And then depending on what a woman is kind of interested in learning, or the approach that she wants to take, because if you're kind of going through the gut microbiome approach, that usually requires a lot of different changes in the diet and a lot of times of supplementation and kind of gut balancing versus, doing a hormone balancing or doing a micronutrient balancing.
So that's a lot of testing. And I just want to circle back to one thing that you said, is that, doctors are sometimes expected to be experts on everything. And that I agree with you. I think that they're not and shouldn't be experts on everything. I see, as a nutritionist, I see women come in and they complain that their doctors don't know anything about food and what to prescribe to them, and what they should eat. And I say that to them all the time. They're not experts. They're not nutritionists. That's why you're coming to see a nutritionist. They can't be expected to be experts on everything. And so I think that's a really good point, is that we sometimes have expectations of our doctors to be the be all end all. And And so then it's nice that there's a company like yours that just specializes in women's longevity. Now, going back to the testing, so that's a lot of testing. Is that something that you expect women to do? I mean, if I walked into your company, or if I called you up and said, like, I am suffering from like hot flashes and therefore I'm like not sleeping at night, would you recommend all this testing, or is there
No.
just something as,
No,
simple as
definitely
like,
not.
just hormone testing? Or
Yeah. So, we have kind of two tracks. So we definitely have the track of women who are kind of looking for menopause symptom management. And those are the women that we kind of just recommend the general hormone testing. But we have the longevity track where women are looking for, the four horsemen of disease. Women, so the four horsemen of disease, I think, are really cancer, metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, and then neurodegenerative disease. And women kind of tend to know their own family history and to be concerned about too. That's just kind of been my experience, kind of counseling women about longevity medicine in general, is they come in and they say, I have a strong cancer history in my family, or, a lot of cardiac. Her mother had a heart attack. My father had a stroke. And, they kind of are aware of two of the four that are something that they're kind of worried about. So that's when we kind of steer them towards those types of testing, when it's something that they kind of want to understand about themselves more on the longevity track, when they're like, okay, I want to understand what my cardiac risks are, and I want to understand what my cancer risks are. Or we might recommend gut microbiome testing if they say, I want to understand what my metabolic risks are because I have diabetes or liver disease or kidney disease in my family. So that's really where those kind of precision medicine tests come into play. Sometimes we do have women who are coming in for hot flashes and they are really, for whatever reason, they are very hormone adverse. They don't want to be taking hormone replacement therapy. And so they do kind of want to go down a more natural route and are interested in more of a micronutrient test, or they're interested in more of a gut microbiome balancing test to see how far they can get with those tests and balancing their system that way first before they consider hormone replacement therapy. But it kind of runs the gamut for all different types of women and all different kind of desires. And that's what we really mean when we say like concierge customized precision medicine, is we really meet the women where they're at. And we try to kind of understand what their goals are and then make recommendations based off of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting that you can really uncover all of this genetic testing and really find out about your genetics, how things affect you, and there's a lot of information to be had. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, right? There's like almost like too much for me sometimes, at least, like too much information. But I think it is really exciting, especially if you do have health concerns and health histories that would warrant that.
What's really cool too, sorry, just one other thing too, because like the genetic testing certainly isn't for everyone at all. And, it's runs around $300. It's not really a test, not really necessary. Sometimes, exactly like you said, it gives you like way TMI, like way too much information. But sometimes it is really helpful. Like we found for people that have like just these like totally elusive symptoms that like they've spent years trying to uncover certain conditions. Like they can't get to the root of it, and a lot of times like women that are maybe diagnosed with fibromyalgia pain or nerve pain, or just kind of these vague symptomatic pain or arthritis at a really young age. Those are kind of when we've had success with the genetic testing. A lot of times for other women, it's kind of like, exactly like you said, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's just way too much information, and it's not necessary either. You get a lot of what you need from their symptoms, from their regular testing, or a micronutrient test, and that's plenty. So that's kind of how we've used that too.
But it is enticing to unearth things and uncover things and get to the why of some symptoms. It is, so that's very exciting. I'm so curious about you mentioned that you could do this microbiome testing if women are averse to taking hormone replacement therapy. And I want to get into that too, and the pros and cons of that. But microbiome testing and then like address hormone imbalances or menopausal symptoms that way. How do you address menopause symptoms with microbiome help, or
So we're not necessarily using the microbiome testing and replacement as just treating alone menopause symptoms. So every woman, like Kristin said, the microbiome, the epigenetics, the nutrigenomic testing, those are all optional. But our number one assay that we do recommend to be able to treat a woman's menopause symptoms properly is a hormone assay, which is an in-depth hormone. It's about, we run, I think maybe be like 15 to 20 panel hormone assay, and really allows us to get granular on like various different levels to give a woman that personalized treatment plan, whether she needs like bioidenticals or nutraceuticals or a supplement, or just maybe some alternative medicine options, things like, it could be as simple as, an acupuncture, things like that. But we're not substituting a microbiome test and using that exclusively to treat on menopause symptoms. So a lot of things that women don't realize is that if your gut microbiome is out of sync and, it's not aligned, it could actually affect your estrogen levels. And Kristin could talk more on that from the clinical side. But that's something that we would use in conjunction. And that's really where our longevity medicine comes into place. And that's one of the things that like differentiates us, because we have this hormone balancing menopause management, and it's tied into longevity medicine, which is figuring out, your health span on how long you could live healthy to prevent disease. And part of those tests that we offer in that bucket are disease prevention.
So using the gut microbiome, to your point, is, sometimes women, we do run the hormones, but sometimes women will want a go at balancing the gut first before they will take hormone replacement therapy or bioidenticals. And in some cases that works, and that's all a woman needs. So it's really interesting because menopause women are so different, just like pregnancy. So, 80% of women in pregnancy experience nausea and vomiting through pregnancy, but 20% of women don't, and they don't have any nausea or vomiting, and they kind of sail through their pregnancies. And we all have had friends like this, I'm sure, that are like, oh, pregnancy is no big deal. I had 5 kids and I could be a surrogate. Right. So menopause is really no different. And similarly with pregnancy, you do have women who can, take the ginger tabs and wear the C-bands on their wrist and kind of get through with things like that. With menopause, we do tend to find that hormone replacement therapy or bioidenticals really are the gold standard, and the majority of women do phenomenal on them, and it works wonders, and they feel absolutely optimal. But for some women, they can get by with alternative treatments, including gut microbiome balancing.
I think that there is a stigma for hormone replacement therapy.
Absolutely.
A lot of women that I know, I think we all know about that study that happened in the early 2000s, right? The hormone study and that just scared the daylights out of everybody. And a lot of women went off of hormone replacement therapy, and then that's been debunked, that study. But I think it's reverberated all the way through. And I think that a lot of women are really scared. They're scared of medicine, I think, in general. So they're just like, this is just another medicine that if I don't have to take it, I won't. But I see women struggling and suffering and losing sleep and having hot flashes all day long. So let's just talk about the benefits of hormone replacement therapy. And then I also want to talk about this, you mentioned bioidenticals versus hormone replacement therapy, because I think that also has a lot of confusion.
Yes.
That a lot of women think, well, if I'm going to go on something, I'm going to do it more naturally, and I'm going to go on bioidenticals. But there's a lot of unregulation with bioidenticals, right? You can literally walk into Whole Foods, I think, and like buy progesterone cream, right? So I want to just talk first about the benefits that you see with hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah. So, and I think to your point too, you talk about when you go into your OBGYN or your internist and they talk to you about the risks of taking hormone replacement therapy, they also should tell you about the risks of not taking hormone replacement therapy, because it is known that hormone replacement therapy, specifically estrogen, has cardiovascular protection effects. It has bone loss protection, and it also has cognitive and Alzheimer's protection. So those are like aside from what it does for vasomotor symptoms or hot flashes, along with the plethora of other symptoms that go along, the loss of libido, the vaginal dryness, the sexual dysfunction, the mood changes, the depression. I mean, the list is over 100 symptoms long.
Right.
The longevity benefits, which is why we've tied longevity into menopause in this company, FemGevity, because we feel that when reproductive longevity ends, women are ready to have the conversation about long-term longevity. And it starts with menopause, the conversation about perimenopause and menopause. So those are like the major significant benefits of hormone replacement therapy, whether you're using bioidenticals or I call them pharmacologics, because some pharmacologics are bioidentical and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So, in addition to the reduction in symptoms. And the really good thing about using hormone replacement therapy is it doesn't have to be forever. It's not something that is going to be the doses can be adjusted and changed as your symptoms change. So it's not like a statin where you start taking a statin and then you're on a statin for the rest of your life. Hormones are meant to kind of ebb and flow, and also to adjust as you adjust. And so I'm very pro hormones and hormone replacement therapy, obviously, starting a company like FemGevity.
Tell me about your version of bioidenticals, because like I said, I mean, I feel like you could walk into, you can get them they're very unregulated. I mean, out in the real world.
Yes. Yeah. So bioidenticals, are meant to be synonymous with what you actually produce in your body. So they're meant to be chemically identical. And so there's kind of a lot of confusion because, for example, with progesterone. So progesterone or micronized progesterone, that's the only way it can really be stable enough to be utilized topically or even orally, is a bioidentical progesterone. It's the exact same progesterone that your body produces. You can get this, like you said, at Whole Foods in a lot of over-the-counter products. There's even an oil that we recommend to some of our patients that are looking for very low dose of micronized progesterone. There's also bioidenticals that are sold by compounding pharmacies. So these are pharmacies where they make their own formula of the medication. And then you can also get micronized progesterone from a Walgreens or a CVS, which is, regulated by the FDA. So it's confusing because it goes both ways. The same thing with estradiol. Estradiol is also a bioidentical, but it's seen in the compounding pharmacies, but it also is available in some prescription medications. So there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of confusion. And my recommendation about compounding and getting something that isn't highly regulated is, so there is a governing agency that regulates compounding pharmacies. Compounding pharmacies, they self enroll, and they got together because they wanted to have pretty high standards. The FDA goes into compounding pharmacies once a year. Their standards are usually that they self-regulate themselves once a month. They have other standards that they don't use shakers for their compounding, that they use blenders, which means that the concentration of the medication is more homogeneous throughout any pills that they're prescribing. And there's a couple other ways that they've regulated their compounds. The other thing that I always say about whenever prescribing compounding medications and what we use is that we only use nationally recognized compounding pharmacies that follow these very strict guidelines. And what's great about using compounding pharmacies is that you're able to kind of get a very personalized dose. So you're not at the will of whatever is available in a pharmacologic. So pharmacologics only have certain dosing. With compounding, you can get very specific about what type of estrogen you want and how much of each estrogen you want. So I don't know if you know, but biased is like a very, and I'm not sure if I'm getting too nerdy or technical too here, but biased is a very popular compounding estrogen to give. So biased is estradiol and estriol. Estriol is a very popular estrogen that's available in Europe. Estriol you can't really get in a pharmacologic. So that's where like the benefits of using a bioidentical can come into play versus using a pharmacologic. What's great about estriol is the estrogen that's produced by a placenta in pregnancy. Estriol is really thought to be the gentlest of all the estrogens, even though estradiol is the estrogen that's found most often in pharmacologics and thought to kind of have the highest risks of side effects. So it's just, and that's kind of, I think, what you get when you get someone who's kind of accustomed to using all the different formularies available versus someone who's just using like a straight up estradiol patch, is you can kind of understand, okay, where's a woman coming from? What's her risk profile look like? What is she willing to tolerate? What is she willing to try? Where her kind of thoughts lie in terms of like administration and how she wants to take this medication. Does she want a patch? Does she want a cream? Does she want a pill? Does she want a vaginal insert? Does she want a ring? You know, all these kind of different things that go into play in terms of what you're thinking about when you prescribe a medication to a patient or kind of make a recommendation to a patient.
So it sounds like it's very personalized. I mean, even down to the types of estrogen.
Oh, yeah.
And that you can really, and so through your testing and through, you know, your company, you can really get laser clear on the type of estrogen. Do different estrogens affect different symptoms?
So yes and no. I mean, estrogen, a lot of estrogen ultimately will convert to the same type of estrogen in the body, but not always. And this is where, if you really want to get down to it, that's where the genetics really kind of tells us a lot of information. We don't always have that information. And so sometimes we kind of have to use symptoms to kind of gauge how a woman's responding to different types of estrogen that she's given. And also, you know, different prescribers do have their estrogens that they like too, and that they feel comfortable with. You know, some prescribers prefer estradiol, some prescribers prefer estriol, some prescribers prefer a combination. And I think it just kind of has to do with your comfort level and your experience and where, you know, the feedback that you've been getting from clients over the years.
I know that the FDA has approved hormone replacement therapy for hot flashes, night sweats, and vaginal dryness. I know, for example, like a friend of mine just went to her gynecologist and said, I'm not having any of those, but my mood is concerning to me. Like my moods, I feel depressed, I'm exhausted, my energy is in the tank. And her doctor was like, well, you don't need to be on hormone replacement therapy. Like you're not a candidate. So if someone came to you with those symptoms, not with the classic hot flashes and dryness and everything, what would you say to them?
So I love this question because we got this question from someone who was they were trying to get us into a gotcha. So we use off-label medications in medicine all the time. And I'll give you an example. So there's a medication called Cytotec, which is called misoprostol. Cytotec was an anti-ulcer medication. Cytotec is used probably in every hospital in the US on pregnant women every single day. It is an off-label use for pregnant women. Now, pregnant women are probably the most protected class when it comes to FDA regulation. They can't have anything. And we saw that with the COVID vaccine, right? So it was like, these are the people that can't have COVID vaccines, like people under 2 and pregnant people. You know, that was like, they're incredibly, you know, encapsulated when it comes to risk.
Right.
So to use medication off-label, as long as it's an approved medication, that it's safe for use, it doesn't bother us that we're using a medication for a different purpose than what the FDA originally intended it for.
That makes sense. So are you saying that you would still go ahead and prescribe someone hormone replacement therapy if they were just coming to you with like, I'm having,
Absolutely.
I just don't feel myself. I just don't feel right.
Yeah, especially if we did laboratory testing on this person and found there to be deficiencies that could be fixed by hormone replacement. Absolutely.
We don't just put people on hormone replacement just because based on a symptom. And that's what sets us apart from other organizations or menopause companies like us. We're getting diagnostic data first, and then they're doing labs. And then based on that, we will still use, a compounding or bioidentical or a supplement. And if someone's not comfortable with an estrogen or progesterone, we're not going to make them take it. It's based on what's comfortable for them. And we'll rework their treatment plan for them. But it's always going to start with laboratory testing to see what their levels are. And, a lot of things with what doctors do, and you can't blame them because it's just in their training and they don't get anything additional in medical school, but you have these universal laboratory ranges and just, they see that it's within a range. So then they don't treat them. And then they have no idea of what a baseline is, or based on, the woman's age or what she's gone through or her environmental factors. And they don't take that into account. And we're also taking those things into accountability for the way we're treating them. So sometimes a woman's progesterone may be within those normal levels, but we're not sending them away based on how they feel. So there's a lot of different factors. And like you said, that's why we're getting laser focused and very granular with it. But we would never just give hormones without testing if it matched the analytical data that we're gathering on them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask a question about sexual health and just libido, because a lot of women say, I just hear like word on the street that they're done having sex. Like they're just not interested anymore. Do you feel like hormone replacement therapy is, just talking about these other, like these symptoms that like kind of lie around like the outer ring of symptoms of those 100 plus symptoms that we could have? What's your feeling about sexual health and sexual function? I know that vaginal dryness is, when that's a problem, that can affect everything. But beyond that, started taking hormone replacement therapy and it just like wowed my sex life. And is hormone replacement a miracle cure for everything, especially when it comes to sexual health?
I'm still libido. Yeah.
I think that it definitely can be for a lot of women. And I think one of the things that you bring up is that it's sometimes the often forgotten, we don't talk about sexual function. We don't talk about libido. We don't talk about orgasm. We don't talk about, sometimes it's not even about lack of orgasm or orgasms. It's that the orgasms have changed, the quality have changed, the consistency has changed. And so those are sometimes the forgotten symptoms. And we think so much about estrogen, but there's so many other hormones that are in play. And, phenotypically women are we have estrogen, we have more estrogen than men, but we have more testosterone. When you compare apples to apples in the amount of testosterone to estrogen, we actually have more testosterone than estrogen. And you don't hear a lot about testosterone when it comes to hormone replacement therapy. A lot of it is surrounded on estrogen. So just even the fact that testosterone is an option, that testosterone often drops before estrogen drops. And also that progesterone and DHEA are two other hormones that drop before estrogen drops. So estrogen is actually kind of the last woman standing, so to speak, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and kind of like what starts most women kind of seeking treatment and seeking care. But there's all these other hormones that are kind of falling first. And we often will see this loss of libido that you're talking about, or the change in the quality and characteristic of orgasm or the frequency, a lot of times before the menopausal time, in the perimenopausal time. And there are so many things that can be done that we just want to encourage women so much to reach out to us or reach out to a menopause specialist to get help, because there's so many options. It can be better.
Yeah. There's so many different, right? It's not just estrogen, right? Which it plays a huge role, but there are all these different hormones, and testosterone is one of those hidden, or we think of it as a male hormone, most women. we don't consider that you could maybe be a little deficient in that, and that might affect libido. And yeah, no, I agree. Do you think that, I mean, overall, every woman should be on hormone replacement therapy or some kind of hormones for their health, for their well-being, for their longevity? I mean, I know that you know what, I take that back. I know that not every woman is a candidate. I mean, if you've had a history of cancers and stuff, I mean, you're certainly not a candidate. But do you think if you are a candidate that most women should just be on hormones for their health?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a candidate, there is, studies beyond studies that show that the not being on estrogen actually causes more harm than good. As we spoke about with the osteoporosis, the heart disease. If you look at dementia and Alzheimer's, they've done studies with the neurons and the cellular regeneration in the brain cells with women that have had estrogen versus have not had estrogen. And just as far as, anxiety and your mental health and physical too. And it's beyond, emotional with relationships. If you go even deeper on things that people don't talk about with, libido, and then becomes issues in relationships and marital issues, and a lot of things kind of crumble and don't need to. And there's a lot of damage that happens when your hormones are depleting and they're not replaced from clinical and emotional levels.
Well, that's, I think, a great way to just end our conversation. I have learned so much today from both of you, Michele and Kristin. So thank you so much. Just tell me again where people can find you and how they start the process of working with you and FemGevity.
So you could find us at femgevityhealth.com, hashtag FemGevity. And we also have our Instagram, our LinkedIn, our Twitter, our Facebook, and we have some videos on YouTube as well.
Great. Well, I will put all of those links in my show notes, and I know that my listeners are going to be really interested in everything that we have to talk about today. I think this is such an exciting time for feminine longevity, and and not just this weird oh, we can age in reverse, but we want to protect our health and our well-being for as long as we can. And so this is really exciting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
you so much, Heather. It has been so fun to talk to you.
Oh, sure. And thank you for coming on, and have a great day.
Have a good day, Heather.
Too.
Bye.
And as always, if you loved this podcast, please consider gifting me with a 5-star review. It is so helpful for me to get the word out on real eating, our real bodies, and real food stories. Thank you so much and have a great week. Bye for now.